Assalamu alaikum, this is Shama Farag. Welcome to Know Your Neighbor. This episode is going to be so unique, and I'm going to tell you why. Last February, it was Black History Month, and I wanted to relate to the experience. It was trendy at the time, so I wrote a blog. I called it Blackness in Islam, How Prophet Muhammad Dealt with Racism in His Community. I wanted to relate to the experience, and I give some reminders to my Arabic speaking or Arab immigrant community that, hey, Blacks have been always a part of the Islamic history since the very beginning. I wanted to say that they have been always the forgotten piece of the puzzle. And I wanted to reach out to my Black brothers and sisters, and I let them know that, you know what, maybe you're not getting so much of traffic regarding the Black civil rights movements or Black Lives Matters from the Arab community because you assume that we know what you've been through, but we don't. And unexpectedly, the blog boomed. In 2 days, I got a lot of traffic and a lot of problems because some people who claimed the problematic said that it was simply lacking the Black African American perspective. And some of my kind Black brothers and sisters suggested that I have a sensitivity class, and I told them, what? I have discourse from reputable organizations, and I learned this and this and that. But it seems like it was only the foundational knowledge I needed to know about the history of the country where I live. And I learned two things from what happened. First, you cannot tell someone's story without having them involved. And we all non-Blacks and non-Palestinians and everyone fall into this trap. Second, people who are willing to step up and share their stories and own their stories are the bravest of all and the truest storytellers of all. And that's why I'm here today. Welcome, Mr. B. I'm honored to have you here. Mr. B is an educator at one of the local school districts here in Seattle. He is a former police officer. He is a podcaster. He is a hip hopper. He is too many things and a lot of things. And I'm really honored to have you here. You take it from there, Joe. Welcome to Know Your Neighbor.
Thank you so much, Shama, for having me. I really do appreciate this opportunity to share and be a part of this process of learning to know your neighbor. And as Ms. Shama spoke about, yes, I am a sixth grade teacher, math teacher in the Highline School District here in the suburbs of Seattle. And I've been teaching for 10 years. Previous to that, I did spend time as a police officer in the city of Atlanta, Georgia. And I absolutely hated that job because, the perspective of a Black man having lived in poverty in a Black community in New Orleans, Louisiana, it just gave me a different perspective. And I had to uphold, Confederate Georgia laws that a lot of my brothers and sisters were not aware about. And so it just wore on my soul. I'm too compassionate for, that profession. Now, there's great police officers. Granted, there's a lot of stuff going on in our communities, but there are some great men and women who really strive to do the job the way it's supposed to be done. And that's what I did. I tried to strive to do the job the way it's supposed to be done and treat people the way they should be treated as human beings. But again, I'm just too compassionate. And I knew that wasn't my calling from God to work in that profession. So I got all the stuff I needed to become a teacher. Previous to me becoming a police officer, I spent 5 years in the United States Army. And so I just have a lot of perspective about the world from being in the Army. I spent time in Bosnia during that, ethnic cleansing time where we spent, time on peacekeeping. But the experiences that I gained from the military and having seen when I thought I was poor growing up and not having much, to see people that had less than what I can imagine having, it just changed my perspective on, humanity. So I'm definitely a servant's heart and a humanitarian because I believe in the human aspect of people. And unfortunately, the things that we see today is just really challenging. So I love what I do as a teacher. I love, as Shama said, I hip hop. I write raps for my scholars because they need that something to relate to, and I feel that it connects us. And so, aside from teaching them math content, I also teach them life content, and I hope that they're able to take something away from what I say or do to be vulnerable for them. So I'm blessed for this opportunity to share in the conversation with Sister Shama. And as she mentioned, I did read her blog, and I was, to be quite honest, I was confused about why there was such, she mentioned, negative feedback towards her regarding what she had written. I thought it was beautifully written. I thought she tied in, the beginning and the end very well. And the line in there of many was that captured me was, the ignorance, right? There's a statement that says, you're stuck in your ways, so to speak, because of your ignorance, right? And so I think when we look at, across the country, the things that are going on, Sister Shama, is due to, ignorance. And, when I think about like me as a Black man, I would be one that people would say, well, if you had any reason to be upset or angry or harbor bitterness, you have the right to do so, because there were times in my childhood where it wasn't necessarily, people in my own community that wanted to do me harm. It was, people in the greater community, the dominant cultured community, the white community, that were strictly racist. And that's the beauty of, if you want to say beauty, right? It's the reality of knowing there's people in the South, there's no hiding their feelings. If they don't like you, if they're racist, they will show you. Having lived in other parts of the country and traveled abroad, you don't see that as much. It's more, manipulative devices of dominant culture. But I could be angry, I could be bitter, right? I could loathe, white men, but I actively choose not to every day, because, and Sister Shama would say this as well, how can you claim to believe in God, but not love your neighbor, right? But not care for the humanity of your neighbor. And so I think it's beautiful that we're here today learning about our neighbor. So
I am honored to have you here, Mr. B. And I'm a sharer. I hate to keep the knowledge for myself, so that's why I will publicly share it, and I will make sure to include all your channels in the video description, and all of your previous work, so people get to know more. My community and my audience will know about you more. So let's get started to our questions.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Okay, I have them in here, my phone. So first question here is, let me know more about you.
Okay. So again, just really briefly, I was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. Grew up there. I actually moved to California when I was a baby, so I didn't have the speech, the dialect that came along with growing up in New Orleans, because it's a distinct dialect that you might hear. So I went back to New Orleans and graduated high school there, lived my life there. Wouldn't take any of the experiences that I experienced there away from living in New Orleans, but it's all about perspective. But I joined the Army right out of high school because I needed to get away. My wife, we've been together since we were 15 years old. And so, she became pregnant, and I joined the Army because I was like, I'm not gonna, raise my kids in this city. I love my city, but it's not a place that I would want to raise my children, right? I wanted them to have more and experience more. So I joined the Army, spent 5 years in the Army, loved every experience there. And then, like I said, I became a police officer, spent 7 years in Atlanta, Georgia as a police officer. And then my wife and I, we moved out here being to Seattle to support my sister and my brother-in-law with their church. And I was in 2006. And we've been here ever since. And I say this, Shama, not to boast of myself, but just to boast of the work ethic that's, people can have if they really put their mind to do it. I knew I didn't want to be a police officer anymore, but I did odd jobs and I went to school. I got 3 degrees in 4 years. And I say that because I was the child that they said was a slow learner and didn't process like everybody else. And, I was in the special needs classes and I was held back. My teacher in New Orleans, Louisiana called me stupid little black boy and said I could not learn like everybody else and told me to go sit in the corner. And so there's a certain level of, what God does in your life that he uses if you allow it to be used to motivate you to be the best person that you can be. And so I only say that to sum up, a little bit about me, to let people know that when you put your mind and your heart and your spirit together and become one, you're unstoppable, no matter the adversity.
Yeah, do not let them tag you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
This is really inspiring. Okay, okay. So let's get to the next question. Teach me something from your culture.
Well, that's a great question, Shama. Because when you really think about like the Black American, there is a lot of searching for culture. Because when you really think about certain aspects of members in a Black community, their culture was stripped way back in the 1600s when the first Black slaves, enslaved persons from West Africa arrived, and it's been a constant stripping. And so there are some who are fortunate to understand a little bit about their culture when we think about, where they're from, what parts of Africa or what parts of, certain parts of the world that they might come from. Unfortunately, with me, I recently learned that my last name is Bourgeois, and that's French, and it means middle class. And so I recently learned that my biological father, his biological father, just didn't really, wasn't a part of his life. So at a very early age, he was adopted. And so his adopted father's last name is Bourgeois. So he took his last name. So there you go. There's that disconnect with knowing the lineage and where it really stems from, because, my dad's biological father wasn't in his life. So we don't know that aspect of it. And so that's where the trauma can take place in a lot of the Black communities where we don't really understand. But, as far as like a personal culture, church has been a really big part of my family's culture, with my mom and of course with my sister and my brother-in-law. So I would think that if you want to know specifically, church in the Black community is a big part of their culture. Sunday gathering, Sunday dinner, previous to COVID and the pandemic, that's a really big thing in a lot of Black communities, and it's really big in our my personal community as well. Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit about my culture.
Great. So let's get to the next question. What Black History Month means to you?
What does Black History Month mean to me? That is a great question. And it means a lot to me because there is so much richness and so much historical context that goes beyond what traditionally we might know as Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, and of course, Dr. Martin Luther King, right? Those are the staples. But it is so much richer than that, because a lot of times when we really think about it, and I'm a historian, I love our history. And so when I think about the importance of educating, you know, not just the Black community, but all communities regarding the perseverance in the Black community during times of slavery and during the civil rights era and all of in between, you know, there's so much that can be taken away. And so for me, Black History Month is not just Black History Month, it's Black History Year, right? It's a 365-day a week experience when you care about, you know, Black community. And one of the things that I find as an educator, Shama, is that that's the component that's missing. We want to predicate, you know, our understanding of history to 1 month. And that's not fair to, you know, all the pioneers, all of the individuals like Harriet Tubman, for example, you know, who risked her life to, you know, bring so many Southerners from the South to the North to freedom, right? But that's not something that's really talked about, right? Or Ida B. Wells, who also, you know, risked her life in Tennessee to talk about the lynchings that were rampant in the 1860s, right? Just after the freedom, you know, Emancipation Proclamation into the 70s, and how many lynchings that took place. But that's not something that's readily talked about. So I like to go beyond the veil of, you know, the traditional staples to really dig into the history of our people, to know how great and how magnificent and how inspiring they really are.
Mhm.
So Black history means a lot to me. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you prepared this question or not. Do you have like supplemental books we can look into, documentaries? If you feel free to answer this question later, or you just send me the links. I will put it in the video description as well. Just
Yes.
let me know.
So I have a yeah, I could just look at my phone really quickly, and I have
Yeah.
there's several audiobooks, right? Like if you just want perspective, right? Like there's a book titled Inhuman Bondage,
Human
um,
bondage.
by David Brian Davis. Inhuman Bondage. That is like a heavy read.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Stamped.
Yeah, Abraham Kennedy.
Yep, Ibram X. Kendi and Jason Reynolds. And then there's also Stamped from the Beginning, which is also by, you know, Dr. Kendi and Ibram X. I'm sorry, and Jason Reynolds as well. And then there's, you know, there's The Cast. That's also one that's a really heavy read. The Miseducation of the Negro, right? Like by Carter G. Woodson. You know, these are all historical kind of context text, but they are, you know, just really thought-provoking. Of course, we have, let's see, what is it right here? The Autobiography of Malcolm X, right? That's a one.
You
And
missed
okay,
that? You say it again? I missed that. I'm writing after you.
yes, The Autobiography of Malcolm X.
Autobiography of Malcolm X.
And then there's Up from Slavery by, you know, Booker T. Washington. And of course, you know, most recently, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Kendi as well.
I love this book.
So those are just a few that,
Thank
you know,
you.
I have. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So let's get back to the next question. How Black Lives Matter movement impacted your life so far?
Wow. And I love the fact that I can be so candid with you, because we've talked before. Unfortunately, right? Like you know, because I always, when Black Lives Matter, right, like became a movement, I delved heavily into, you know, their agenda, their being the founding sisters that established the BLM. And unfortunately, you know, it's been removed. And I don't know if you know this, Shama, but there has been dissension amongst, the founding sisters. They're starting to come apart at the seams. The organization, the founding sisters, right? There's been a lot of scrutiny and a lot of, speculation with the founding sisters. But I delved into what's really their reasoning, right? Because, unfortunately, whenever there's an organization that, rises up, such as, Black Lives Matter, there's always going to be that, speculation, that wondering what's their real aim? What's their real goal? I really honestly don't think they anticipated the movement, because it started in, 2014 out of Ferguson, Missouri, after, Brother Brown was murdered there in Ferguson, Missouri. And so it was small, small incidents and up here, and, BLM was popping up every so often, but I really think it manifested with, the loss of Brother Floyd, where, his murder. And so for me as a Black man, I never bought into the hype of Black Lives Matter, the movement, the organization. Of course, my whole life, Black lives has mattered, right? I'm a Black life. And I can recall situations where I was literally, my life did not matter to another human being. And that's what I talked about earlier with those, white males that wanted to do me harm growing up in New Orleans. And so that alone, I was just wondering why all of a sudden now do Black Lives Matter? When since the dawn of time in our history, our lives have always mattered. We've done, courageous things. We were literally held bondage. Like when you think about just that whole understanding of slavery in this country. And so, it was great to see. It was great to see how, they brought so many different communities together. But it's so unfortunate now that they're starting to unravel the organization is. And that's unfortunate. And it seems to happen that way in the community so often, where you would have a powerful movement or a powerful individual of stature that succumbs to, white dominant culture because of money and because of other things that stray them away from their mission and vision of, equality. And, I often think about if I was in that position and I had so many millions of dollars being donated, where would my foundation waver? And, I would like to say that, no, it wouldn't, but yeah, it's great to see that there is a direction for the young, men and women in the Black community, but a lot of people are unaware of the trauma within the organization that doesn't really give it any more credibility.
More credibility.
Yeah, because when you think about it, sis, it all goes back to, and this is just Joe B's opinion about these things. It all goes back to money, and of course in the Bible, maybe somewhere in the Quran, it speaks to, how the pursuit of money is the root of all evil, right? When you think about if you use it as a resource to support and uplift others, then it will constantly flow back to you. But if you're in constant pursuit of it for selfish gains, to have a lavish lifestyle and luxury, it's going to crumble you. And unfortunately, that was some of the things that took place with BLM.
You know what? In my faith tradition, they say that when God wants to test you, there's two kinds of tests. The hard test, that he plague you with poverty or sickness or whatever, and the harder test is he plague you with wealth, health, and all of the good fortunes and money. And most of the people fail in the second one.
Yeah.
And we all do good in the first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we tend to do better and behave better when we are plagued and weak and vulnerable. But whenever you have all the things, you're distracted and you think, oh, all of these are mine, and it's distracting.
Yeah.
It ruins the heart.
Yeah, it certainly does. And that's what we're seeing. And so I would encourage everyone out there that's listening to this or that's going to listen to this to, don't be blind to a movement. Really understand, what's at stake for everyone's lives. Because again, now, it's like we had this push and this great thing, with BLM as an organization. But now, we have to be the BLM. We have to be the movement within ourselves, in our communities, to, continue to uplift one another and continue to support one another and continue to empower one another. Because if not, we'll just go back to the same cycle of, oh yeah, there was another this happened, or there was another that happened, and now we're fighting, and we never really gain traction, because in the end, it's about selfishness, and we cannot, be selfish. As this series is called, Know Thy Neighbor. Let's really get to know thy neighbor and support one another.
Yes, I agree. Totally agree. I can say that enough. Okay, let's get to the second question. So, it relates to the first question, the just question I asked you, and I'm asking you, do you see an intangible change after the movement, Black Lives Matter movement?
Sis, I'll speak directly to this point. Yesterday, all around the country, individuals celebrated Juneteenth as a federally recognized holiday now. And, as a Black man, right, who understands his history, I had mixed feelings about that, right? Because you think, okay, so the Emancipation Proclamation, there's a little history lesson really quickly, right?
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Abraham Lincoln, signed a document into, law emancipating slavery. And, it was September 1st or January 1st, 1863, just after the Civil War. And so because of the slow movement, right, there wasn't a speedy way to get around. Texas, one of the most west southern states, continued to have their slaves, right? They're enslaved, humans. And word did not get to them until June 19th from this particular general that all, everyone that was being held in bondage was no longer to be held in bondage. And so there's speculation around, the word didn't get to them because, the plantation owners wanted to continue to have, another crop season. There's a lot of different reasons why, but you think about, okay, so we are commemorating the end of such a traumatic period in our lifetime in 1865, June 19th. But has anyone thought about the Reconstruction period and how that was such a dramatic time? When you think about, okay, the westward expansion, right? The first westward expansion was over 2 million Black Americans fleeing from the South, because during Reconstruction, sis, there was over 4,000 documented lynchings. That was documented. You think about how many that were not documented. Okay, so that was a period in our lives, right, that seems to go unnoticed in history. And then, okay, all right, so you have that component, you have the Emancipation Proclamation, 13th Amendment, Reconstruction, but now we move into a time period of shortly after Reconstruction in the early 1900s, where there was this peonage, and there was this convict leasing time frame, where so many Black bodies were in the South were just swept up for like simple crimes. If they couldn't produce the fact that they had a job, they would be sentenced to jail, right? And the purpose of that was for the South to continue their industry. Because when you really think about it, sis, like, and I don't want to hold this too long, but I could talk about this all day. It's just that when you think about the reality of a nationally recognized holiday that will commemorate the ending of such a traumatic period, and there's no other statements that are made about that. To be quite honest, I'm sorry, I'm just cutting real quick, but to be quite honest, I think Joe Biden, bless his soul, he's really trying, is trying to make amends for his part in the 1994 crime bill. And so here again, 1994, the crime bill that was created by Joe Biden and at the time, President Bill Clinton, did such a dramatic, it decimated the Black community. Because what that crime bill stated was, it was mandatory minimum sentencing for drug crimes and 3 strikes felony laws. And who did that target? It targeted the Black community, right? And the Latino community, but Black and brown, right? It targeted Black and brown men in that community because did the movement of Black Lives Matter really do anything? Sure, yes. It put things into place. When Brother Floyd was murdered, BLM, it changed the landscape of how we might do policing in the future. But there's still Black men being shot, right, by police. It definitely put it out there for all the world to finally open their eyes to dominant culture, white dominant culture, open their eyes to aspects of what's going on in the Black community. So I would not say that the movement of BLM did not do anything, because it did. And I would be wrong to say that it didn't, but there's too much for me. Again, going back to Joe, I'm not representing anybody but myself as a Black man, sis. There are too many cases of, what about that? Or why isn't that being recognized? How many of us actually know about that, right? Because we just want to pacify and say, oh yeah, well, we're finally doing something. We're recognizing, but you know what? There's this talk about reparations. Okay, that'll be too much to put out there, but they can repair the Black community by saying, you know what? We are going to put in some federally funded community centers that is free to the public in this community, that has social workers, that has psychologists, that has, clinicians, that has healthcare workers, that has all of these components. If you really want to think about how can we make amends in the Black community, that's one way. Don't give me a national holiday where, it's like, how does that going to affect me anyway, right? A day off, okay, cool. But how does that really make amends for the historical trauma of over 250 years of chattel slavery in this country? So I try not to be cynical when it comes to that, but I'm always thinking like, okay, is he really, because a lot of people might not know about Joe Biden and that 1994 crime bill, sis.
I didn't know about it.
So you can research and do the history of mass incarceration. Mass incarceration. And so I was thinking, okay, so he's going to nationally, get this holiday out here. just to say, oh yeah, we're doing something, and great, yeah, something's being done, but what about that? Maybe he's like, now, well, you can't hold that against me now because I did give you guys a federal holiday for Juneteenth. It's nationally recognized now for forever and ever. So we can't say, well, what about that, Joe? The people in our community are still being affected by that. There's still men and women that are locked up because of that mandatory minimum sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
that's just my thought.
I loved how you are giving practical ways of celebrating than giving a day off. You can celebrate by these things first, and then the day off is gonna come anyway eventually.
Exactly. And so I don't know, sis, and I'm hoping that you'll let me know that people chime into these thoughts, these sentiments from me, because not very many people are thinking about that. There's such a historical trauma. And then there's this is another episode too, maybe come back in for meet your neighbor again, but there's this thing that's called critical race theory. Have you heard of that, sis?
Say it again. I couldn't hear it.
Critical race theory.
Yeah, I'm hearing people saying stuff about it on Facebook, but I didn't. Critical race theory, CRT. Yeah.
Yes, CRT. Yeah.
Explain it. Yeah, just take the time to explain. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for me as an educator, I'm all about critical race theory, but there's white dominant culture, right? What wants to do away with the ideology of critical race theory because they perceive it as this attempt to overthrow, or I don't think overthrow is the correct word, but I believe that people in white dominant culture are afraid of critical race theory and its teachings because it's going to paint them as the devil. It's going to paint them as, such bad people, right?
No, but this is unfairness. They have to let the kids know what happened in the past, so you build bridges. So you learn from the previous mistakes.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not it's your ancestor who did that. It's not you.
Exactly. And so I do trainings for, WEA here in Washington, this Washington Education Association, and I'm a member of their implicit bias and race training cadre. And that's one of the things that I always say, right? The house is built, okay? You didn't have any part in building the house, right? So yeah, that was your ancestors who built the house, right? As an analogy. But I say, how hard is it for you to do remodeling on the house?
Yes.
Right. So yeah, you didn't build the foundation, you didn't build the structure of it that's holding this house together, but you have the power to do the remodeling for it. So why are you so apprehensive about remodeling? When we say our eyes are open, this past summer with Brother Floyd losing his life to, for a heinous reason, and it opened a lot of eyes, but yet they're still closed-minded. Because critical race theory and being taught the right way, right? Just giving historical context to create conversation, right? It's not to demonize or to villainize any human being. It's just to say that, what? This is what took place. And this is why we have such a traumatic experience in most Black communities. Since there's a dichotomy in the Black community, and it goes back to the plantation, where you had field hands and then you had house servants. And that was purposefully done, where the house servant was treated considerably better. They were still a slave, but they were treated considerably better than the field servant, and that created animosity.
Oh, so the ones that serving at homes, they are feeling comfortable about being in their positions, and they're confronting the ones who are working on the fields.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so vice versa. In the field, the field servant, the field, enslaved person had an animosity towards the house servant because they were they got to stay in the house and they got to, eat all of the, the leftovers that they prepared and all of that stuff, right? And so people don't think about how that matriculates through lineage. And so the Black community, the face in the Black community is the only face in this country that doesn't know its lineage. right? Because you can trace back your Egyptian heritage, right? There's others that are of color, whether it be Latin or, other, Philippines and different parts, they can trace their lineage. The Black American, there's such a dichotomy because it's like, well, I got mine. I'm gonna live my life. I'm not worrying about everything else that's going on. I have a good job. I got a degree. I did all of these things, right? And so when you think about that type of person versus the one that's struggling, that one that, doesn't have a job or is ignorant because they didn't go to school or they dropped out of school because of whatever scenarios, they're always pitted against each other, right? We can never be unified. We can never be one. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier with BLM and movement of how they're disintegrating within. And it's unfortunate. And so this is why I'm so appreciative of you in this, this conversation, because you are really trying to bridge communities together. And it's unfortunate that, it takes traumatic events, and travesties in our Black community for us to kind of think, how can we band together? How can we stand together? Because I don't know if it's a proverb or if it's a cliche or if it's a statement, but it says a house divided will not stand. And
Yes.
critical race, yeah.
Yes.
Critical race theory and the way it's being taught or the way it's being, stated is not to divide houses. It's just to make them aware so our future, our children can really be a community that loves their neighbor as themselves. But if we keep, letting history be in the past, then we'll never learn.
They will never learn. Yes, yes,
So,
yes. Yeah, this is education is power. Knowledge is power. And it's in a positive way, and it's not to bring harm. So you've been hiding your history all of these years, and this is how it turned out. So how about you try the other way around? And connect people together and bridge people together and let them know about each other and share their stories together and have honest conversations.
That's all we need, just an honest conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So next question. You are a multi-talented person.
Thank
Who
you.
inspired you and influenced you in your journey?
Oh, that's a great question. My father died when I was 15 years old. And so, of course, my father, he was a very strict, very firm, very disciplined, man. I love my dad. I love my father. And today is Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. And so I would have to say my father, he had the greatest influence on me because I didn't have a long time with him. So he taught me everything about being a man and being a righteous man and doing things the right way. Now, am I perfect? No, I am not perfect. I've made many mistakes. But, my father influenced me the most. And also, this is not about religion because I am not a religious man. Because religion is man-made and is distorted. However, I believe in, Christ and his teachings as a model of how you should, be human in this earth. And so I love my brothers and sisters, whether you are Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish, right? I love you the same because you're human. And so I don't hold religion over people's heads, but influence to me, that's not my father would be Jesus Christ. And, the way he lived his life and the way he, was such a humanitarian. And, his teachings and his lifestyle. And that's what inspires me because when I look at as being an educator, I look at my scholars and I think about, what way can I be the best impact on their life? What way can I, plant a seed that maybe gets, buried deep within their heart and doesn't flourish until they're 25 years old, right? And I think about, okay, I do that by loving them unconditionally, loving them first, seeing them as people first, and then as a learner. Um, so I aim to inspire with knowing that if I did anything ill or tried to cut corners, my Father in heaven would not be proud of me. And so I do the best I can to not disappoint my Father. And I've lived that way since I was 15 years old. And so I don't judge anyone who does things with their life, with their, with their body, because that's your choice. So I've never drank or smoked. And I say that because, again, I didn't want to disappoint my Father. I saw what alcoholism could do to someone because my father suffered from that. I saw what the use of drugs can do to someone because my father suffered from that. And so I saw that affect him and how it deteriorated him. And I was like, I'm not going to do that because people need me in this earth. And so, and then when I came to know Jesus as a model for my life, coupling those two things together, I just try to be the best person I can be. If I make a mistake, I apologize and I try to be better. I try to empower and inspire through, things that are relatable to everyone. And I just try to generally be the most approachable person that you can ever come across. And so just as an example, and then we can move on, but it's not about me, but just as an example of humanity and my humanitarianism. There was a person that, said, hey, I like your shirt. I wish I had that shirt. Right now, this is not like, the cliche of giving somebody the shirt off their back. Like you hear, I actually took my shirt off and gave it to him. And it was a new shirt. It was a new, like, it was a baseball jersey kind of thing. And I just took it off and gave it to him. Because my thought process was, okay, I'll get another one. I can go buy another shirt like that. It wasn't like I hoarded it and said, oh, okay, cool. Thank you for liking my shirt. Right? I actually gave it to him. And so that's the type of human I try to be because my Father modeled that and Jesus Christ models that.
Interesting. Okay, let's get back to our questions. Okay, so this is my favorite topic, food. Okay, so share with me what's your favorite dish? Do you make it? And if you do, share with the recipe with me.
Yeah, so there's a lot of dishes because again, growing up with my father, he cooked all the time. And, he always told me that, it's not a woman's place to cook for a man, so you better learn how to cook. And so I've been cooking, for I'm not a dynamic chef, but it's just little things like, it's not a Southern dish that you would think traditionally. I love meatloaf, right? So, and I do not a traditional gravy. I actually just do a meat sauce with the meatloaf. And, we would either have like rice or corn or, some type of vegetable with it, or we would do, noodles. So that's one of my favorites that I do. I'm not a big meat eater, but, like I do dabble with a lot of seafood and salmon. So I do a lot of baked salmon and mashed potatoes with some, greens on the side or, some corn, again, having a vegetable. But, I am open to exotic foods as well. But I really stick to like those types of like turkey, ground turkey or something like that. But, seafood. So actually, I just prepared for my wife today a shrimp pasta.
Mm.
And so, with some red sauce, some shrimp pasta, with some noodles,
Mhm.
really simple, nothing extravagant, you know. But yeah, I definitely like to cook, not for myself, but for others, so I don't mind doing that. So no, like that dynamic recipes, sis. I'm sorry, I can't give you any dynamic recipes because I don't really have any that's been traditionally passed down. It's just, the meatloaf. So I would just do, turkey ground, and I season it really well with, I don't really like onions or peppers or anything like that, but you can season however you like. I just
Mhm.
use regular spices, herbs and spices to season it really well, not too salty because it has its natural salt in it already.
Mhm.
And I let it bake, and then I pour the red sauce over it, and I poke like little holes in it to allow the red sauce to seep in, so
Mhm.
it stays juicy.
That's a cool trick.
Yeah, exactly, right. So
Mhm.
and then again, I just mash the potatoes up,
Mhm.
and make sure that they have a little seasoning, not too salty, but and then some corn or some vegetable on the side, and you
Mhm.
have a good hearty meal that fills your belly up. So
It is, it is. And you said you put spices. Is there's a specific kind of spices you put? I usually use the old ground spice.
mhm,
Maybe sometimes I use the black pepper. Is this
mhm.
something different like that?
Yeah,
Black
yeah,
pepper as
exactly.
well?
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, so here is another question regarding your favorite things, your favorite artist and why.
Well, growing up, I grew up on a lot of like old school R&B music. Um, but I don't necessarily, I mean, of course, like Michael Jackson, right? Like I love Michael Jackson, as far as music. Um, but there's, Sam Cooke, you know, because when I was growing up, my father, every Sunday, like we talked about earlier, the tradition of,
Church. Mm-hmm.
he would just play, all types of music on Sunday, jazz music, um, a little bit of, rock and roll, the Beatles, things like that. So I grew up with a variety of musical interest. But now I don't really listen to rap or hip hop, right? As an art, because I don't. This is again my opinion. It doesn't edify. It doesn't build up. It doesn't. It just is degrading. It's degrading to our young women, and it glorifies this negative lifestyle in most cases for our young people to, and it's like poison. So I don't really
Why?
listen.
Why do you think so?
Well, it's just the lyrics, the words. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if you when you have an opportunity to share, some of my music, there's no profanity. It's all positivity,
Mm-hmm.
and it's written with a purpose. As a blogger, as a writer yourself, you know that every word matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every word in a sentence has to be connected to the greater picture. And
Mm-hmm.
as a person that writes poetry and writes short stories and writes music, that matters to me. And so I just think it doesn't do anything to build up, because you listen to it and eventually you start to recite these terms, these words in this song, and whether you believe it or not, you become a part of that, right? It
Mm-hmm.
attaches to your spirit in some degree. Now, it doesn't make you go out and kill somebody or shoot somebody or rob somebody. That's an extreme degree, but
Mm-hmm.
you find yourself reciting these words, and it becomes commonplace for you to call your sister, whether she's your blood sister or not, the B word, or your brother, whether he's your blood brother or not, the N word, because that's what you constantly hear. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, um, I don't have a favorite artist as far as music is concerned, or even in the scheme of art as a part of literature or portraits or paintings.
Mm-hmm.
I just find beauty in the little things of life. And so, if you would say, this is probably going to sound cheesy or corny, but it's my truth. Uh, my favorite artist is God. because there's so much beauty in everything that we really focus on. We can find the beauty of it. We can find the beauty in it. And so I love life. And I tell my scholars all the time, sis, that, you know, when you've lived the life that I've lived and you've seen so much death, like literally, like people dying next to you, you learn to appreciate the little things about life because it can be gone in an instant. And so I live life every day to the fullest to, you know, to just be happy, just to be joyful, to find joy.
Yes.
And so when you think about artistry and art and things like that, God is my favorite artist.
So next question is, so I have two questions last. I do have a question regarding cultural exchange, if you have any questions for me, and we will end up with a song from you, and I will let myself off the camera and you just let you sing. Do you have any questions for me regarding culture exchange or something?
Yeah, you know, because you spoke about your background being, you know, part Egyptian, is that correct?
Egyptian, Arab, Muslim, yeah. The
Yeah.
horrible mix.
No, it's a beautiful mix.
Thank
And
you.
so I've always, you know, I've always wanted to, on my bucket list, if you will, to I want to go to Cape Cod, South Africa. And then I want to go to Cairo, Egypt. I want to visit Egypt because of, you know, the history, the richness of the ancient Egyptian. And, you know, because briefly, I'll just say that from a story, when I was in Bosnia, I'm sure they, you know, because that's in Europe, that they've, you know, experienced, you know, Black people, but there was a elderly woman. We were in this small community and we were preparing sandbags, you know, on the road. And I was the only Black man in my unit amongst, you know, white men and women. And so she kind of looked at me as she was walking up the road, and she just stared at me, and she reached her hand towards mine. And this was in 1995. And so, I'm sorry, not 1995. This was 99, actually, going into 2000. But nonetheless, that, to give you a context, she reached out her hand, and of course I reached out mine, and then she, you know, kind of rubbed her hand over mine, like as if to kind of rub my skin off. And so that's, yeah, just like that, that surprised me, because I was like, so you've never seen a Black man before, right? Like it was just surreal. And so I'm always curious to, you know, see how they perceive, you know, Black Americans in different parts of the world. Okay. Because of the perceptions of media and, you know, music and movies. I'm always curious to know that. And so I'm curious to know that maybe when you were growing up, in, you know, was it Egypt or was it Saudi Arabia?
I grew up in Egypt. I was raised and grew up in Egypt. Well, you know what? Most of Egyptians don't look like me. Most of Egyptians are people of color. And Sudan is it's the country south of Egypt. It was a part of Egypt, and Sudan is actually an Arabic word, literally means the land of the Blacks. So and people, Egyptian people are people of color. My father was a person of color. My brother is a person of color. My mother-in-law, she's from Sudan. She is Black from Sudan. Nice. All my in-laws, the half side of her family, my mother-in-law and her side was from Sudan. And we are intertwined and interconnected, you know, and we don't have that. I personally don't see it. Maybe somebody else, but Egyptian don't look like me, because I have like Turkish ancestors in my blood. So I might be, among my brothers and sisters, I have one brother and one sister. I'm the lightest skin, but all of my family, people of color, you know?
Yeah.
And regarding touching the skin, and actually, I just saw a Netflix show about Malcolm X, and they were talking about his transition in thoughts and ideology after he came back from the Middle East, where he found healing and he felt welcomed. It changed his mindset regarding the hating the whites or having those ideas. So I'm encouraging to go there, and I will give you a list of the places you can visit. And guess what? All the places of interest where you see history and culture is distributed all over Egypt. Luxor, where you go and see the museums, and if you look at the walls of the museums, you will see that they will identify the Egyptians as blacks, black kings, black queens, people of color, all over Egypt, from south to north. So I even my uncle is married to a Sudanese woman. We are multi-racial family. So,
yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
I
So
hope
yeah,
that answered your question.
Yeah, for sure. It's just, just a matter of I want to explore the world, and I want to explore, and see
And
other
it's
cultures.
cheap there. You can go and you will have a full day of yummy food and exploring things with the minimum the minimum you can pay. I encourage you to go. So we will end up with a song. I will take off myself from the camera and you take it from there.
Okay. Oh, okay. So is it going to be what song? What
anything you would. I would love to hear you. Okay.
Oh, no. Okay. So let's see here. Okay, so let's I think I can show a video.
Okay.
Of
do you want me to make you the host?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, so
all right, so let's as we prepare to depart, I can play my song that the video adds a lot of essence to it, but it's the lyrical content of this particular song. And I wrote this song because I wanted individuals to understand, the plight of individuals in our community. And so this song is called Disproportionality.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen here.
Hey, yo, let me holler at you for a second, man, on a serious tip, man. You know what I'm saying? I just want to make you think about something for a second, man. It's kind of funny that only in America, 13% of a population can end up being 65% of another population. You feel me? What population is that? The prison population, man. Let me holler at you for a second. Look. Disproportionality, yeah, that's our reality. Why are we the victim of a biased brutality? Morality's the question. We've been the obsession. Since the birth of the nation, we've been a focus of aggression, oppression. And keep my people stressing. Can't ever get ahead because of the constant repression. The lesson is written in the history of my people. 3/5 of a man, so tell me how we equal, deceitful. And when will you atone? Cause everything you own, you didn't build it on your own. You built it on our backs with every last crack of the whip. And purposely you stripped my people love a heritage, so you could write the script, so you could be the savior, so you could taste the flavor, so you could be the one that say you did us all a favor. But the truth be told, there's beauty in this mold. Nothing you do can dull the shine of this gold. They say it don't matter, that all lives should matter. But since the foundation, it's been us who's been tattered and broken and beaten. And we constantly repeating the cycle of our history because we not eating the knowledge that they left for us. So what do they expect of us? Absolutely nothing but for us to stay ignorant. 400 years we shackled and chained. The shackles might be gone, but the chains remain on our minds. But it's about that time for us to stand together and be of like mind, to educate ourselves, to elevate ourselves, to love and not hate the image of ourselves. 44 gave us hope. He made the world believers. So look inside yourself and know that you can be achievers. Or whatever you put your mind to do, whatever endeavor you want to pursue. Never forget your history and never let it die with you. School should be a lifeline, instead it's become a pipeline to the prison system. My kind will barely see the sunshine, but how do we refine and how do we design a system for success has been historically maligned? Don't be blind to the ways or blinded by the haze. The disproportionality is not some kind of phase or fad. There's justice to be had. When you make comparisons, you'll see it's quite sad and shocking. Implicit bias ain't stopping. It's the 21st century, so why aren't people flocking to make the changes? We've seen too many cases of black and brown faces being mistreated by the races, and we supposed to take it and we supposed to fake it like everything is good while we struggle just to make it. School should be a place where everybody's safe, where everybody's equal, cause we're the human race.
Beautifully written, beautifully sang with, it touched my heart. And I see humans, but no humanity. I agree with you.
That's right. Thank you,
But
sis.
you are the change. You are the change, Joe. I'm glad to have you here on in Know Your Neighbor. And thanks for all the resources, the things you shared with us, and your stories were beautiful. And keep up with what you're doing. You're doing amazing.
Well, I appreciate you, Sister Shama. Thank you for, I feel like, I've gained a sister in you, like we talked about before. And this is what it's about. So thank you for being a champion in our communities to open doors with, situations like this, with Know Your Neighbor and the other beautiful things that you do for the community. And I look forward to connecting with you again. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you.
Of course.